Hello?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Just been yelling about music at Denny for a hot minute.
That works. Okay. Welcome to Pass Up Podcast, everybody. Welcome in. Today it's not just me and Duke. We have a guest.
Thank God.
But welcome to Pass Up Podcast. My name is ThatDutchGeek.
I'm Sodu 33.
Nice. And how about our guest? Just introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, hi everybody. My name is Denny Brandt. Ignore the T in my name, as that's a little misleading. But that is how it's spelled, but it's not how it's pronounced.
I still trip over
that. And I totally get it. Like, it's so not what people are used to, because though my name is pronounced Denny and it sounds like an English name, it's not actually English. So it gets a little confusing. But I run my own channel about Dungeons and Dragons content. I've got a podcast, which I recently did a recording with Dutch.
Yeah.
The episode that Sir Duke's in is coming out next Friday. I've been getting in touch with I've been getting in touch with people and love talking about tabletop and roleplay.
Hell yeah. I gotta say, because it's still fresh because it was only a couple days ago, but I had a blast recording that
me too,
podcast
dude.
with you and Ethan.
I gotta say, I want to get on again. I just
yeah, no, it was a lot of
what to talk
fun.
about.
I bombed that fucking game we played at the end, but hey, that's what it is. We had some
Spoilers.
interesting conversations about world building, and it was fun to see how we all kind of had a different approach, but also drew a lot of similarities. It was really cool to see. It was a good talk. It was a good talk, for sure. Yeah. So chat before we get into anything. ! Dicely. If you at any point want to check out any of his socials, it's there. His Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and his Podbean for the podcast. Go hit that stuff up because it's good content. Great
Straight
content. If you're into D&D or nerdy tabletop stuff, definitely recommend checking it out for sure. It's a good time.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
and
go ahead.
another nice thing about this podcast is I've started reaching out to people who also play tabletop and getting, because I've got my regular crew of guests on the podcast, and then you guys I've recently met through connections, and it's nice to bring other people in who don't know each other and get everyone together and just meet people within this community, because there's just so much stories to share and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've never met Kraken before. We did that podcast recording. He's a cool dude, so it was fun.
and it's fair to say, Denny, you've got such a positive energy, such a a good vibe. You surround yourself with great people, so it's obviously great to sort of intermingle, I guess, with that community as well, because we're a bunch of shitheads around here.
Oh yeah, we are. We are. It's crazy how typically you see tabletop communities are very very positive and very. And dude, when we're not doing anything D&D related, we're toxic pieces of shit, bro. It's wild.
Me, Soko, and Koiba were on all together, and you probably got a little slice of just we just rag on each other, dude. It never ends.
I feel like me
ragging
and
on them
Ethan.
'cause I'm
I feel like
epic,
me and
but,
Ethan, we behaved. I feel like we toned it down. Yeah.
Well, just be yourself, dude.
But I was I still gave him shit for saying dumb stuff, but not as much as I usually do.
Yeah. I can't. I guess I toned it down considering how much of a bad time. It's Soko and Koiba. It's so easy to rag on, dude. So I would say maybe it's a little more contained than usual, but it's really
yourselves.
nice. Yeah, I guess so. But it is nice to sort of cross-pollinate, I guess, with and sort of a group that shares interests, but is a little, diversifies the personalities a little bit, right? We're all very at each other's throats for the sake of comedy, and on the Denny side, it's wholesome. Everyone's supportive. It's beautiful. It's a great thing to be a part of. So obviously, to sort of jump into the brief sort of questions we have prepared, because we like to waffle a lot. I think I mentioned this to you when I first offered to sort of have you on, because like as soon as we had anything set up, I was like, well, we gotta, you know, reciprocate, right? We gotta have you on as well, without a doubt. So I mentioned to you, it's not quite as I guess I said professional. I don't remember exactly, but it's like it's not quite as structured, you know.
Right.
Usually it's just Dutch and I, like a stream of consciousness waffling on about like whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, we'll have like certain topics in mind, but in between the topics, it's a lot of waffling. It's a lot of just.
But we figured having a guest,
stuff.
you know, button up the top button and maybe put on a little clip-on tie or something. So we have a few questions, and one of the main, obviously overwhelming similarities between us all is tabletop RPGs in varying degrees of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So how did your personal journey into tabletop RPGs begin?
So this is also funny because like this is something I ask like my first time guests on my podcast, and as the host, I haven't really had the chance to answer this. So
well, there you go.
This is this is an interesting turn of the hat, I guess. But yeah, so my trip into tabletop RPGs, I guess, started with much like you guys. Like I'm big into video games. Like I love video games, but once I got into tabletop, I definitely became more into that. Like I still like video games, but it started with Knights of the Old Republic on the Xbox.
I love that game.
It classic
is such a good game. Like my brother and I, we had gone into like an EB Games, which is a game store in Canada, and they had this like little station set up for Star Wars Battlefront, and we played it for like 10 minutes. We were like, we love this game. We left, but we forgot to remember what the name of the game was.
Right.
So we just started buying a bunch of Star Wars games every time we could. And one of those games we accidentally bought was Knights of the Old Republic. And we put it in. He tried to play it, and he was like, oh, this is totally not the right game. And I played, and I was like, this is complicated. I want to learn what this is, because it has like it's got your like ability scores, your feats on level ups, like great narrative, making choices. And I was just like, this concept is brilliant. And I didn't quite piece together that this was the same formula as tabletop role-playing games. And eventually in high school, some friends at lunchtime one day were just like, hey, we're going to get together, play D&D 4th edition. We're making character sheets on this laptop that one of our friends has. Do you want to join in? I was like, sure. I have no idea what that's like, but I'll hop in.
Wait, I'm just to interject real quick. Your first D&D experience was 4E?
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
But hey, you could only go up from there.
That's true.
True, actually, yeah. I think we had a similar talk about, because obviously when we were on with you, we mentioned where we all got started, and yeah, 4th edition gets a bad rap from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, KOTOR's an amazing game. It's funny you should mention it, because I had a friend who had 2 Xboxes, right? One of them was chipped, and the other one, the disk drive was broken, but Knights of the Old Republic was installed on the hard drive. So that's all that Xbox was for. And that's like all you needed, dude. Like we had stacks of like awful pirated Xbox games, but that one Xbox with KOTOR on the hard drive was that was magical. That game is so good. It was BioWare, right? Like early era. But peak,
because it definitely almost peak. Like it had that classic, what now is the classic BioWare formula with like, player choices matter. Always have to like, you have like the good guy playthrough, the bad guy playthrough, or like pick and mix whatever the hell you want to do, which is now very like, that's basically their like USP at this point for BioWare. They do it in Dragon Age, they do it in Mass Effect, they do it in everything now. But Knights of the Old Republic was definitely like that. That's when people, I think that's kind of what put BioWare on the map as well for a lot of people. It's like, yo, this is
probably because it was a very pure RPG experience, I think, for console as well. Because I mean, you'd seen there were like Fallout games, and obviously Baldur's Gate as well. But I don't think I think KOTOR just kind of stepped it up for a licensed game too. I mean, that era was kind of, I guess, like a renaissance for Star Wars games, because the prequels were not long since out. So there was like Star Wars Battlefront, like you said, which is obviously an amazing game, and Star Wars Battlefront 2. KOTOR was amazing. KOTOR 2 also amazing. The Starfighter, was that one? And like Rogue, was it Rogue Squadron? There are a lot of really good Star Wars games. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm struggling to think of bad ones, and I know there were plenty of bad ones because they were licensed out of anything. But there were definitely a surprising number of good ones for as far as like movie games go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, the video game, was actually quite good, fun to play.
Yeah, I think similar things are said about the 1 and 2, just because like you do just play through the movie, right? And although special effects and like CGI weren't really in their prime at that point, when you put stuff like spinning lightsabers around in a video game, that's the perfect thing to put in a video game. Yeah. So
I
even
played,
just the title games.
I think those games came out like a few years after that, but what's it called? The Force Unleashed, where you like play as
Force Unleashed is kind of cool.
Oh yeah,
bad guy man. Who's the fucking guy that voices him? It's oh dude, he's huge. What is his name?
I want to say Mark Hamill, but I don't think it's Mark Hamill.
No. It's the same guy who does the main character in Motorcycle Zombie Apocalypse game, Days Gone.
Oh
he's
man.
He's also a TV actor. He does a lot of D&D stuff as well. Fuck, what's his name?
Vin Diesel?
No.
Vin Diesel's a solid guess though. The Iron Giant.
He's what's his name?
Jack Black.
What's his name?
I just keep
Sam
throwing
Witwer.
names out.
Sam Witwer.
Oh,
Right.
He like voices, and he's still like, I follow him on Twitter, and like every once in a while you hear him like tweet about like, yo, Force Unleashed sucking sick, dude, because he like really passionately loves that game, even though he also has like the main voice role in that game. Also a big nerd, by the way. I think, doesn't he have like credits on some D&D books as well? I'm pretty sure.
It's a deep dive.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Sam Witwer. Yeah, Dungeons Dragons Arts and Arcana, a visual. He has some D&D credits as well.
Interesting.
Enough. Yeah.
So
But that's like the
fourth
one Star
edition.
Wars game I played.
Okay, you can both educate me here because I'm not fully in the loop. But what is so bad about 4th edition?
So 4th edition was, especially in comparison to what we've got now, where 5th edition's very free form. It's very much like it encourages creative thinking. 4th edition was kind of like you built a class, and though classes in 5th edition give you features, 4th edition kind of gave you like powers specifically. So it's like you can activate this power and this is what it does. Like if you're a fighter, you've got a whirling blade, so you spin in a circle and attack everybody. It really limited like the flavor you could give to your abilities and your powers. So there was a bit of a restriction, a bit more of an emphasis on like you got to have a battle map because everybody's got to know where everything is, because all the powers are so critically about knowing where your opponents are and the tacticalness.
4E also has a big emphasis on combat, and roleplay kind of got downplayed because combat was super extensive and a bunch of extra rules, a lot of math. Like combat encounters would take hours. Like just average combat encounters would take like hours. I'm not even talking about like boss fights and stuff. And roleplay, it was very like, it limited you a lot within like just the rule set it gave you. Like there's a lot of I compare it to Pathfinder a lot, where it's super. There's so many like systems you just don't need. You know, it's not a fan.
Yeah, Pathfinder is definitely a big crunch. That was a second system I went into, and it's more akin to D&D's 3.5 because it has so much to it. There's so much crunch. But I mean, 4th edition wasn't all bad. There were like, the way I describe it is it was a necessary step to get to where we are now. Like they introduced skill challenges in 4th edition, which I think is a great idea. Then there was also there was a second thing that was good from 4th edition, and I don't the way they like kind of categorized their monsters and their NPCs. There was like minions, there was solos, strikers, controllers. Like they had these kind of labels that I think helps categorize things a bit more, and especially minions. They're just like, this is a monster. If it get hits, it dies. That is so satisfying for somebody who knows Fireball. And I'll use that in 5th edition.
Yeah, but doesn't 5th edition has a similar rule where it's like, I forget what it's called, but 5e has a similar rule where it's like, there's an army of 200 skeletons, and if you hit them, whatever gets hit, they die. I know we've used it a couple times in our campaign.
Oh yeah, well, like
forget,
you have a large number of something, and they basically have like a shared HP
not
pool.
It's kind of like a swarm rule.
No, it's fuck. Soko is in chat. Soko will probably blurt it out in chat. He knows what I'm talking about. But
Hi, Soko.
Fuck. Similar.
Also, thank you for the other compliment, Soko.
Soko's just here to kiss ass, dude.
Straight up. It's like you said. It's almost. I don't want to say a necessary evil, but definitely a necessary step to sort of evolve the tabletop game to get where we are now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like every alternate installation of Windows, right? It's like wouldn't have Windows 10 without Windows 8, and you wouldn't have Windows 7 without Vista. So I guess we wouldn't have 5e without whatever happened with 4th edition.
Yeah, I mean, you get your feedback and you improve based on that, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I've only ever played 5th edition, and I've heard. See, Pathfinder does sound really interesting to me because I like low fantasy settings, right? And Pathfinder is a little bit more gritty than 5e, and maybe a little less fantastical, or at least that's my impression of it. Where someone said to me that Pathfinder, you're more like just an average person, whereas in 5th edition, you're a hero, right? So it's like, yeah, it's a little bit more gritty and realistic and challenging, I think, is the impression that I have of Pathfinder, and I don't think I would object to trying it out. And I think that's where Critical Role started, right? Before they switched. I think they switched systems when they started streaming it.
They started in a Pathfinder game and moved over to 5th edition when they decided they wanted to stream it. I don't think I played enough of Pathfinder to make that assumption about its system. But what I thought was great about it was character creation was so in depth. Like you could pick. I think my first character was an Undine, which is what 5th edition considers a Triton. So just like an underwater fish person. And they had like, here's what the race is, but also you kind of have some points, and each of your abilities is worth a certain amount of points, and you can swap for some other abilities that we've also got for this race that aren't just part of the initial race. And so like, say you don't like the idea of being into camouflage underwater. Well, you could swap that 3-point ability or something like that for another 3-point ability. So I swap it in for, I've got acid breath now. Like, it was just so much more customizable.
That actually does sound pretty cool, I'll be honest. Like a little a point buy system for various perks just to have right from the off, especially from the sort of perspective of your character race, because right now, other than like we discussed this before, but being able now to change your race origin or whatever it is, so you can sort of shuffle around your stat bonuses and stuff like that. There isn't a whole lot to really customize without, I don't know, splurging on additional source books and stuff. Dutch, did you find out what the rule is?
Yeah, it's the mob rules. So basically what that entails is, say your party is surrounded by like 20 orcs or 50 skeletons, however big. You basically, the amount of enemies determines, okay, if I roll 1d20 and I roll enough to hit, X amount of mobs will hit their attacks, the rest will miss, based on how many mobs there are total. And it goes the same way, the other way around. If, say, you roll to attack and you hit, depending on how much damage you do, say like every like 10 points of damage you deal at higher levels, or every like 5 points of damage you deal, is one mob dead. Basically, that's kind of how that works. So kind of, it's kind of the speed of, it's for like large. You'll 100% see that come back when we do D&D over the next few weeks, when we like, because you're about to like siege a fucking city. So there'll be a lot of like large scale battlefields. That's when those rules come into play. So you don't have to like roll initiative for 30 fucking guys and roll to hit every single one of them.
Yeah,
stuff like
and,
that,
and
you
I
know?
guess that sort of it's like a Lord of the Rings fight scene, right? You know,
Yeah, pretty
you
much.
do enough damage, you're a hero, and they're minions, so you killed X amount, and you are basically just Aragorn slicing through orcs, and
Yeah, exactly.
you know, or whatever, right? And then
Yeah.
that must be cool to flavor as well, because
Yeah.
it's not like rounds get any longer. You just messed up like 10 dudes in 6
Yeah,
seconds.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like, it's for instance, you know, Aberrant, because he's like front guy, has big sword. He'll just like slice and just like chop 5 heads off in one swing, shit like that. You know, it's really cool.
Here,
Really
okay. First major deviation, but I've spoken to you about him before, Dutch, because he was Frisian. There was a guy,
Yes.
here
we go.
a
Not this guy
barbarian, a real life barbarian. Okay, from what is now the Netherlands, but it was obviously at the time like Gaul tribes and Germanic tribes. So this guy was like 7 feet tall, and he was called Groot Pierre, which just means like Big Pierre.
Big
And he
beard.
was renowned for wielding a sword that was 7 feet long, being able to behead multiple people in a single swing, and being able to hold a coin between his thumb and middle finger and bend it with his index finger. Like, this guy's like a real life D&D boss, dude. They found his sword, like it's in a museum somewhere or something, and it's 2 meters long. It's ridiculous. And there's like a statue of him. Man, I need to make a Gros Pierre character sheet, dude. Barbarian, I guess.
It's interesting, like, what pieces of history like just seem like they shouldn't exist, and
Right.
then they do, and you're just like, that's gonna be some great inspiration for some fiction right here.
Absolutely. I mean, it obviously was. I mean, stories about like, you know, woad warriors and like the Celts and people like Gros Pierre, or what, you know, one Roman or something sees a guy that big and he tells his homies about it. There's going to be rumors that turns into legend or mythology of giant men that wielded enormous swords, and it's like, obviously there's not much to go on, but they have his sword. There was a guy big enough to wield that sword. Whether him bending coins or beheading multiple people in a single swing is true, could just be folklore or legend, but he had a sword that big, so he must have been a pretty fucking big dude.
Born around 1480, died in 1520. Frisian warlord, freedom fighter, conqueror, and folk hero, Pierre Gerlofsdonia. There you go. Or like,
Damn.
And he had a shibboleth, I think they called it. So the Netherlands was split between like Friesland and, I guess they just called it the Netherlands, I don't know. But there's some subtle differences between Frisian and Dutch, or probably some broader differences, but I'm not 100% sure. But they had this thing called a shibboleth, where it was like a password. And if you could say this phrase, it would prove that you were Frisian and not the other guys, so they wouldn't kill you. And it was like butter, bread, and green cheese. Something. It's like butter, brie, and green cheese. Something. Oprioch de Fries, or something like that.
Sizikan is geen oprioch de Fries.
If you can say it, you're Frisian or something like that. It's like really funny. The little factoid. Like how does who even was he? How does he have so much history? This is
I don't know.
what,
but,
500 years ago.
Apparently his helmet is kept in a museum in his like birth town in Friesland up north.
Oh, man.
It's pretty cool.
So there you go. That's Pierre
Real
Galofdonia.
life barbarian, dude.
Real life
Sick.
barbarian. Goliath barbarian.
Yeah, pretty much. 7 feet tall, bro. That's a tall man. Tall man.
That's I just want to throw onto this as well for anybody who does tabletop, like I think it's so crucial to like go back and find like historical legends and myths, and in some cases just interesting historic facts like this, because it's such an interesting font of inspiration for your games. Like, and though you might watch like Game of Thrones and be like, oh, I'm inspired by this, but my players might see the connection. If you just go to history, there's so few players that are
there is
such
some
historic
wild
buffs.
shit out there. Like,
Yeah.
So, Denny, you got started in 4E. Do you remember what kind of character you made?
Oh, what was your
my first character was a changeling warlock.
Nice.
I think they were a warlock of the fiend.
Ooh. Hell yeah.
I didn't really get to know the character personally very long because I think we played maybe 3 or 4 sessions, and at the time, like, this was my first role-playing experience, so I didn't really invest into the character all that much, and 4th edition being what it was. It was about the combat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked the idea of being a character that could transform, and initially I was thinking of going shifter, but I think the changelings just seemed so cool. I was like, yeah, I gotta do that.
Changelings are
I played a
very
changeling.
cool. Yeah,
I still
he plays
do.
changeling at the moment, so
Yeah.
he's,
I'm way overboard, but
yeah, you did. But it's
beautiful
fun because 5e you actually get the role play super overboard, and that's, dude, it's fun. It's fun seeing you do your thing. I'll be real.
I feel like a changeling warlock is intimidating. I guess I would have been intimidated for my first experience. Was it everyone new? Were there any like who'd been playing for a while? Or was it just like a whole group of your friends who none of you had any idea what was going on and just figured you'd throw your sort of hat in the ring?
As far as players went, I'm pretty sure all of us were new players at the time, except for the dungeon master who had played in some other people's games. So he had all the books he needed. He knew how to wrangle us up and kind of manage us. But his narrative style was so different from anything I've experienced since then. Like, I've talked about this on my podcast as well, but he would, like, the man was an enigma. He had the weirdest mind I've ever come across. So I think there were so many pop culture references. I think we walked through a field of flowers of some kind and we started getting dizzy. We came across Navi the fairy from Legend of Zelda.
Nice.
Our Dragonborn party member was like, I'm so annoyed with this guy. Ate him. And then Navi was talking to us from his stomach, so we're like, okay, well, that didn't solve anything. We ended up fighting the logo of Internet Explorer and the Firefox logo. Oh no! And then we boarded a spaceship, took off into space. My Discord
just like froze for like a good 10 seconds.
Yeah, same here. What was that?
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, Discord just flat out died.
Can you rewind that 10 seconds? You ate your Dragonborn, ate
right
the
after
Navi.
Dragonborn ate Navi the fairy.
Yeah.
What happened?
Weird. He ate Navi the fairy. We fought the Internet Explorer and Firefox logos.
Man,
and then
the
boarded a spaceship, took off into space, and our barbarian killed the captain and skinned him. We were like, what the hell was happening here? It was just the most surreal experience.
Nice.
And I think after these first games, I was like, I am inspired to be a DM because I want to explore a more traditional fairy tale role-playing experience or fantasy role-playing experience.
I'm a sucker.
I mean,
for
at least the
throwing,
barbarian was sort of true.
like, I'm a sucker for throwing like references to things in my game. So like, there's Elder Scrolls references. There's World of Warcraft references. I have a book that I found online that converts both World of Warcraft and Witcher 3 enemies into a 5e like stat block, which is really cool. That I've kind of like took some things from. I'm a sucker for references to like pop culture that fit the genre, of course. Like,
I do. I
style.
also Witcher 3 is. I mean, well, the Witcher series in general is such a cool window into a completely different folklore that is so rich and like because a lot of the stuff from Witcher is drawn from like real, I think, Eastern European or Central European folklore. There's a lot of like, how do I explain, like groundedness to them. Like in The Witcher specifically, you run into NPCs that are like shaman or medicine men or whatever, and they all have their like kind of rituals and like superstitions, but they're real. And it's like, oh, there really is a druid living inside the tree, or there really are 3 witches in the swamp that actually do control the fates of these people if they don't.
Children, yeah.
Right, and it's that's really, really interesting from
it's like, but the thing with I guess that's like the comparison from like, if you look at Central / Eastern European folklore and compare it to like folklore from like America, Just look at the Brothers Grimm, for instance. It's all like super dark. It's all like super dark, twisted. Like I feel like Disney, for instance, Disney has a couple of stories based on like Grimm fairy tales, but they Disneyed it up. So like, Little Mermaid actually has a happy ending, whereas in the Grimm fairy tale book, she fucking dies. Like
like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Was that a Grimm fairy tale? Oh, maybe it wasn't.
It is. If it's not Grimm, it's definitely Eastern or like Central European though.
Yeah, all I guess in Western culture, I guess all real sort of long-lasting fairy tales are that Central European vibe, at least around here. I mean, Norse mythology and things like that. I know that's mythology, not necessarily fairy tales, but like mythology and folklore, Scandinavia is wild. Like that stuff is. And Greek and Roman mythology as well. It's some very interesting stuff. The stuff around like. I really don't know much actually about classic. I would say about British Isles based folklore, like all because Picts and like the sort of Celtic and Irish, Gaelic, they all have very long, deep roots here. So I imagine that there are some interesting ones. There's like I think Irish folklore about elves that steal your shoes or something, and like. Things like brownies and fairies and stuff like that live in forests and are all sort of tricksters and stuff like that. That's definitely a thing, but I guess because
I got some folklore for you.
Oh yeah,
just a sample from Folklore of London in the southeast.
Oh,
Mary and Eliza
Spring-Heeled Jack is a good one.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Commonly known as the Bidenden Maids, were a pair of conjoined twins supposedly born in Bidenden, Kent, England in the year 1100. They're said to have been joined at both shoulder and hip, and they have lived for 34 years. It is claimed that on their death, they bequeathed 5 plots of land to the village known as the Bread and Cheese Lands. The income from these lands was used to pay for an annual dole of food and drink to the poor every Easter. Since at least 1775, the dole has included Bidenden cakes, hard biscuits, imprinted with the image of 2 conjoined women.
That's so bizarre. What?
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go.
British folklore, conjoined twins from the 1100s. Oh.
And like my own background, I am Mohawk, Canadian First Nations. And like, something. What I like about. Well, I mean, there's plenty that I enjoy about my culture, but I've always been a fan of my stories from that culture because so few people know about them, except for like more modern day ones like the Wendigo people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
from that's becoming more pop culture. But that one even is more specifically Ojibwe, which is another indigenous tribe in Canada. But like one such folklore that I was going to throw in my game that didn't get far enough, so I'm fine revealing this information. There's one of our legends is like the legend of the flying head, and it's this cannibalistic witch that basically auto cannibalized themselves. So it was just like their head left and their hands left, and they'd haunt the woods, and just anybody they captured, they just mow them down. And they were described as like just these giant heads with disembodied hands with giant claws and plates the size or eyes the size of dinner plates. And there's this one story about this monster where this woman is at home and she's roasting nuts on a fire, and she sees this creature watching her from her window. And
oh boy,
to kind of trick it, she removes the nuts and instead throws stones on the fire and pretends to eat them. She's like, oh, these are the best things I've ever eaten. Right. And the creature's like, well, if they're that good, I need them. Flies into the room, grabs up the stones, throws it in its mouth, and just screams and flies off. And it's just like, I guess, a story of...
That's quite classic subversion, actually. Like, even worlds apart, where we've got, like... oh man,
Little Red Riding Hood,
one fairy tale that I absolutely love.
To the wolf or whatever, right?
The 7 Billy Goats, or Billy and the 7 Little Kids, or something like that, where the wolf comes around and the wolf actually eats like all of these goats, but one of them hid really well.
Yeah.
And they go out into the garden and they cut open the wolf and they pull out all of the goats, and then they fill his belly with stones.
Fill him with stones. Yeah. And like, I feel like Little Red Riding Hood, they dealt with the wolf really similarly, right? Didn't they like cut his belly open as well?
I think real Little Red Riding Hood ends badly. I'm pretty sure Little Red Riding Hood.
It's a grim fairy tale, so yeah.
Yeah. Like somehow she. I mean, you know, there's that classic like, oh, what big teeth you have, etc., etc., and then she gets eaten. I think maybe it got switched up where like the lumberjack comes and whatever, but
cuts him open, I'm pretty sure, and pulls him out again or some.
Right.
And then fills his belly with stones, and then chucks him down the well, and he can't get out because he's heavy. I think that's kind of how the PG version of that goes.
A lot of stories of chopping stomachs open and putting stones.
Yeah. A lot of rocks. Just a lot of rocks.
A lot of
being
rocks.
Eaten.
Yeah. Being eaten. Whether it's voluntary or not, rocks end up in stomachs somehow.
Interesting though, because I mean, like I said, like Worlds Apart, still that same sort of tricking the big bad monster somehow. And or you know, that sort of trope of like, oh, this horrible evil monster just can't control its greed and is somehow unforgivably stupid as well. Like, oh, cooking rocks on a fire, but boy, she pretended they were tasty. They must be the best. Like, yeah. I think that's really interesting. I imagine there's an untapped wealth of very interesting folklore from all reaches of like First Nations. And Native American stuff, like in general, like that's, I hadn't even considered that really. Obviously, being in Europe and obviously like the most sort of popularized fairy tales and most published ones are all going to be from here, because back in the day, you know, when fairy tales are really a thing, we were exporting
when
culture.
Fairy tales were real.
Left, right, and center. Yeah, when they were real. Yeah, when there really was a witch's cottage in the woods made of candy, right? Yeah. But yeah, that's it's almost a shame. I mean, of course, it's a huge shame that sort of facet of cultures kind of remained untapped because of good old colonization, baby. You'd love to see it.
Yeah, not only history, but also like, just going out and finding like other legends and folklore from other cultures is a great way to get inspiration again as well. Because I know like if you start going to like Asian stories, those stories are so bizarre in comparison to everything we're used to.
Asian folklore is fucking wild.
And like the classic theater tells it in such an insane way as well. But what's really interesting about sort of tapping into historical folklore outside of like real historic events is that you can obviously take inspiration from the monsters for for creature ideas and things like that, but it's also like they're so heavily tied into cultural norms and rituals that you can create a new culture within a D&D world, taking inspiration from other folklore where they have these different beliefs and rituals and stuff like that. Of like, oh, you have to do this or this monster will come.
And dance around the well at midnight, or else
you all hold hands and dance around the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Or Krampus comes. You know, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
And those customs and stuff, especially in sort of the way that a story is told in D&D, you've got this group of adventurers, they travel around and they're going to be new to these customs, and it could be so easily put together that they didn't put their shoes outside the door before they went to bed because they're adventurers, and so they have this encounter. Like, there's a lot of like intrigue and like some of it's so bizarre, and like the further afield you go, the weirder it's going to get, and there's going to be so many different just wealths of creatures and customs and culture out there.
Dude, that like, this is like completely like, but you mentioned Krampus. Dude, that fight that I made my D&D group fight Krampus around Christmas. Then the first year we did Dungeon Select, it was like, oh, that's gonna be fun, like little themed encounter. But I made him like
I watched that one.
I made him what was he again? He was a satyr who was cursed to every like Winter's Veil or whatever the hell I call my Christmas in D&D. I forgot. I have it written down somewhere. That he like is forced, like turned into this like devil monster wearing a red coat with white, like dressed up like Krampus, like Santa Claus essentially, and he goes around. He gets zooped from the Feywild into the prime material plane to kidnap as many naughty people as possible, stuffs them in a bag, brings them back to the Feywild, and just eats them. So it's
Hell yeah.
really fun. I think you were there for that, weren't you? I think pretty sure Lausanne was still there.
Yeah, I think so, because wasn't that maybe I'm mixed up, but wasn't that
It was
around
in-
the
it was
time
in
that I took
Calzir
candy
in the
from a
tavern.
baby?
No, that was the Headless Horseman.
Ah, that was Headless Horseman.
Yeah, but
It feels familiar,
it's
but
fun.
maybe I don't remember. If I was still around, because
I'm a
Headless Horseman
sucker.
was Halloween.
I'm a sucker for just like referential, both combat encounters, but also just quests. Like or like city design. I'll like design a city completely to look like exactly like a place in The Witcher because it's a fun to reference and blah blah blah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like just kind of showing praise for stuff that inspires me and helps me do this sort of things. I don't know. I like it a lot. I'm a sucker
also,
for references and stuff.
I think for a lot of players, when it is things like Warcraft or The Witcher or Elder Scrolls, etc., we're all gamers.
Yeah.
So we can appreciate the reference, and also the adaptation from how we're familiar with those characters to being in the world of D&D, where the encounter is a little more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh Jesus, I'm fiddling with all sorts of stuff on my desk and just throwing it all over the place. Right. So folklore and fairy tales aside, we're here on our Dutch and My Own, our live podcast, our baby, Past the Salt. It's been around for a real long time.
It has been, yeah.
In various forms. What was it that inspired you to jump into the world of podcasting? When was your first podcast? What was it about? Like, what's your whole podcast experience been like so far?
Well, so the not only is what I do just the podcast, I like the Speak Dicely podcast is technically a branch of an overarching channel called Dicely D&D.
Yeah.
The idea of which is I want to make it easier for people to get into 5th edition and to kind of encourage this idea of like a kinder gameplay. That's like the pun of the entire thing is dicely, nicely, you know. I'm trying to keep that positive attitude. So with in terms of the overall channel, I just introduced this as of this past November. And I released an intro series on how like that takes a new player and hopefully prepares them to get ready for their first game, including
I think I watched one of them. One of the it's sort of, I guess, educational sort of videos, just an introduction to D&D for a new player.
Yeah. So I like take players through like, here's a character sheet, here's where you're gonna fill things out, here's the information, and like I give links to all of like the free resources that exist that are official from D&D. So basically you can go from nothing to ready to go. And then that was the first branch. The second branch I wanted to focus on was the podcast. So I created the Speak Dicely podcast, and initially I wanted to make Dungeon Master videos to help out Dungeon Masters. But as the podcast began rolling, I'm like, I guess in a way, this kind of is the Dungeon Master help. So the first episode of that, I think, released in the first week of December. So a month after the channel started, the podcast was going. And I'm releasing these episodes every Friday, for now at least. And thankfully I've got a very supportive group of friends who have been helping me out. Like, they helped edit the scripts for the educational stuff. They've agreed to occasionally come in to be on episodes of the Speak Dicely podcast. And it's just been very nice. Like, I upload these things to YouTube. I've been researching which hosting site would be the best on my budget anyway, to put the podcast on, and then it branch out to other sites that have podcasts, and everything has kind of been going smoothly, thankfully, because I've got friends who are already doing podcasts. I'm getting their insight, and I've got all this support, and it's just been a very fun experience, and I'm loving talking to all these new people that I'm meeting.
Yeah, expect once we get to moving, once we get to campaign 2, for them, just like expect me to like bombard you with questions, and like, because we want to provide our D&D sessions in podcast form as well. So expect me to be in your DMs by that time and just ask
Yeah.
you about everything and how to spread out podcasts.
Yeah, right, right.
So,
Yeah, and I'm totally happy to help with that kind of thing. Like I've had the help. I've had the help for myself on my end, so it's like just help like in the creative space. Like I think the big thing is just helping out other artists and like making sure that we can kind of step up together. Because community is important.
I think that's something that sometimes can be easily missed. I think as streamers and YouTubers and stuff like that, especially in the gaming sphere, games tend to be competitive, and it tends to be more about like competing with your peers, not growing and supporting with and alongside working together. So that's, and in the creative space, I mean, obviously there are people, competitive people in every branch of everything, whether it's creative or otherwise. And I've been, you know, I've been in music school and stuff like that alongside people who are incredibly competitive, and usually it doesn't go well, because although they have a lot of their own drive, they tend to sort of lose the support of the people immediately around them because they're so competitive, when those are the people that immediately they're going to be the ones that can help you out. And that's like a hugely important aspect of any sort of creative industry is.
And it's super cool to see as well, like compared to all these other communities when it comes to like Twitch especially, but just like online entertainment, I guess is a better way of putting it. If you look on Twitter, for instance, if you tweet out anything D&D related and use like the right hashtags, there's so many helpful people in that community that are like, yes, I want to support this, I want to help this, whatever. Whereas, you know, if you try that in like the competitive gaming scene, you just get told to go fuck yourself.
Straight up. Yeah, straight up. I mean, there are definitely, you know, there are definitely people in each community that would do the other, but yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
There's usually the vocal, or well, the most vocal people in more in gaming and streaming and stuff like that. It tends to be a little more toxic sometimes. A little more toxic. Yeah. And then when you see the people that are like really positive and stuff like that, it's like it feels really fake, and that can in itself become quite jarring. Even when it isn't, like it's almost strange to find someone
who is such a positive attitude all the fucking time. You know what I mean?
Bottom frag, dude. We had our friend Andy on the podcast a while ago, one of our first guests. One of the most positive people I've ever met in my life, and it was just insane. Like, I can't believe this guy streams and plays video games, because it's like he's
so positive about everything.
He's so
it's
positive
crazy.
all the time. Such a
I mean, he did switch up his content to now he stopped streaming on Twitch altogether, and he has a YouTube channel and a podcast dedicated to like self-help, making you become more productive, stuff like that, which fits his character a lot more for being such a positive guy and a helpful guy all the time. It eventually it was like, okay, well, maybe gaming isn't exactly for him, and it turned out to be that thing.
We lost a good one,
but now he's like creating all these like podcasts and videos that are all about getting the most productive, getting in the right mindset for productive days, and self-help as in both mentally, but also how can you organize your day better to be better at content creating or whatever it is that you do and stuff like that.
I'm curious.
Switch it up.
Since you know, like it's only been since November, which I say only, it's already 4 months now. Can you believe it? Who are your inspirations? Did you say some of your friends? If you want to do like any shout outs, anything like that, the people that really helped you out, the people who do podcasts that got you into this.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's really odd. I think a really odd shout out, because like I started listening to podcasts more heavily like right before the pandemic started, and Dicely D&D had been something I'd been planning for like, it had been in process for 2 years. I used to work on a channel called Below Pro Gaming, which was like video game Let's Plays, and I did do Twitch streaming with that channel as well. But I wasn't finding the fulfillment that I wanted out of it, because then I was inspired by like Game Grumps and all that, and it was clearly a very saturated line of content to be creating, and it's like, okay, well, I like Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to start planning to make this a thing. And in terms of the overall channel, I was inspired by Critical Role, as many others are, I'm sure.
Same. That's when I got started. Yeah.
But I mean, it's like I don't think I was too heavily inspired by anybody to feel like I'm really copying anybody, because like I'm doing an educational thing, a help thing, and I am in process of making a campaign, which I think will be more of in line with more inspired by Critical Role. But in terms of the podcast, I was actually inspired by a silly podcast called Doughboys, which is a couple of Hollywood guys who go to fast food franchises and just review them with guests. So they like go to Taco Bell and be like, I got the taco. What'd you think? I fucking love Taco Bell. And they're so funny.
That sounds
and
so
it's
familiar. Why does that ring a bell?
And it's a podcast very much for its own entertainment's sake. Like, it's not really helping anybody, but damn, are they funny.
Yeah, right.
And
that's how we feel.
yeah. And not that Speak Dicely is in any way just entertainment, because I think we have great conversations that help with storytelling and role playing and how to play the game. But I was inspired by their business, I guess, operation. It's like they're because there's a lot of logistics you got to consider, like how many times do you got to record it? What is your release schedule? What standard of quality of audio are you putting out there? And when it comes to podcast, audio has got to be the most important factor, because that's the
all
thing
it
that
is.
hits people.
Yeah.
It's audio.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean,
yeah.
like content aside, like obviously you've put together a well put together podcast. You've clearly got in mind, I mean, obviously the whole brand you've got in mind, plans for it. So yeah, I was just curious because I couldn't imagine you sort of stepping into the podcast space without some sort of inspiration. So I will check out Doughboys. I listen to podcasts a lot. I'm just
looking at some of their podcast titles, and there's one just called Wendy's Breakfast with the Sloppy Boys, and I don't know why I find that funny, but it sounds fucking hilarious. I don't know.
I listen to Ear Biscuits, which is Rhett and Link, if you're familiar, and recently started listening to the guys from Super Mega after they split from Game Grumps. Actually, I've been listening to the older episodes, so there are a couple where Aaron Hansen steps in and does a couple of podcasts with them as well, and they are super funny, and they are just my level of dumb humor as well, the pair of them, that I really do enjoy the Super Mega podcast too.
Poopy, funny, loud, funny.
Yeah,
well, the Super Mega Cast is definitely a different level of comedy, but I've listened to them for a long time too, and when I'm in the mood, it's like, yeah, I'll go to those guys. They are funny.
Yeah, because they are so childish, and it is hilarious to me. I sometimes think I'm funny, and then you listen to like someone who really is funny, and they say some funny shit. I'm just like, man, I wish I was that funny.
I wish it was that.
Yeah, right. Even if it is the dumbest thing, even if they really are just laughing at like, this game is a bunch of poopy ass sticks. It's like that's hilarious.
Smothered in chocolate
You
fishies.
smeared all over your titties. Like what?
It's a mood.
Sometimes, dude.
I mean, sometimes that's all you need, man. Like,
That's
sometimes
my mood.
what you
Like 85% of the time. The other 15%, I'm just crying and listening to in the aeroplane over the sea. That's really, it's sort of my two speeds throughout the last year is watching brainless YouTube and listening to sad music.
You know, this is kind of off topic, but I also recommend Tip of the Tongue on YouTube, which, Sir Duke, I think you'll be interested in this. It's a couple of guys who do voice acting work and radio work, and they just talk about things that are relevant to that. Like, I, as a podcaster, very much appreciate my voice and like to know how to use it better, I guess,
get the most
is the way
out
to
of
put
it.
it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting you should mention that. So, not long ago, I listened to like the very first episodes of All Work No Play, which is
Discord. Relax.
Oh, not
relax,
again.
buddy. Okay, we're good.
Are we good?
This is the very first episode of
All Work No Play. So Liam O'Brien and Sam Riegel, but this is from like 2012, and they are talking about because obviously at the time their main probably still is, but their main hustle was voice acting and stuff like that. So that was also a cool listen to get some perspective on that, especially having watched a lot of the Between the Sheets, and you get a little taste of the history of like everyone, sort of the dynamic in the whole group and how they all met and stuff like that. And then yeah, listening to this very first episode of the All Work No Play podcast and being like, wow, they're so young and they work so hard. I got to do more with my life. Like, damn. But yeah, tip of the tongue. So yeah, I just sort of looked up voice acting, auditioning, hell yeah, dude. For about hour 42 episode about auditions in general sounds like something I need right now, to be fair. So I appreciate that.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a great resource. The guys are funny. Like, I don't even remember their names. It's been so long since I've listened to it.
So with Dice D&D being like an overarching like umbrella that has like different types of content, obviously like the podcast takes a good chunk of your focus at the moment, because you put a lot of hours in that stuff, if I have to believe the Discord, and the fact that you're like 4 weeks ahead or something like that, 3 weeks ahead when it comes to uploading podcasts, and like you're on the ball. Any other content avenues that you want to maybe someday also dabble into, like add to that umbrella of content that you're already kind of providing? Anything like on the radar that you're like, oh, maybe one day potentially I'll also do something like that, or are you just completely focused on what you're doing right now?
Teni cosplay.
Damn. That's a deep question. I mean, I think right now I'm mostly putting my focus on what's ahead of me, I guess. Because you're right. The podcast does take up a lot of my time currently. And I'm currently unemployed. Big woof. Though I'm waiting to start a job. But with the pandemic, who knows when that'll be? I'm technically been hired, but meh. So I'm just putting all my time into my creative projects. And yeah, like you said, I'm like a month and a half ahead of my schedule, just because I want, like, the next step is getting this campaign going. And I want to make sure that I'm not overloaded when that time comes, because I have to gauge, like, what is the workflow now that I'm adding this extra step. Because
you also mentioned when we were recording that you are going to record those D&D sessions, right? And potentially do something with that, streaming wise as well, I think.
Yeah, that's the plan. Like, it's not just a campaign for fun, it's going to be a campaign for entertainment. And I've picked my cast based on not only who I think are good players and who would get along, but also who understands the entertainment side. So it's not like I've put it forward to them, like, this game is meant for you guys to have fun, but I think you understand also the fact that we're going to be putting this out there, that this is also a show. So, and once that gets going, I think what I foresee happening is it might rotate every other week, like an episode of the game, an episode of the podcast, and then rotating like that.
Yeah.
That's my prediction of what's going to happen, but whether I can actually balance it all, we'll see what happens. My dream...
That does sound like quite a workload in respect.
If you're ever looking for, some guest spots or something,
and that is something I have been toying with as well. Like, I want to bring guest people in to create, like, one-shot characters for this overarching story. Kind of like what you did with Sellotape Beanie, who I see in the chat there. Also,
we've had
I'd play in a
handful of guests come and go over the course of the campaign. We've had a handful of people that, like, played along.
Beanie never went.
Yeah, Beanie never left, but
he stuck around.
Typically, guests, they will stick around for like 2-3 sessions, and then kind of their character like moves on again and does something else, and they leave. I don't know. I like that. I like the idea of just bringing a new character into the fold, having them just kind of like aid the main party on the specific quest they're on, because they happen to have a personal interest in that quest as well. And then when the quest is done, they just trot along and they go somewhere, do something else.
It's like it's kind of like a DMPC, but they're a player, so they aren't privy to any of the details of the story, and they have a much more sort of pure interaction with the other players and stuff like that. I think it's always nice to sort of, rather than having a sort of NPC as a MacGuffin that the DM might play or portray. If you know someone who could, I'm free most of the time, for example. It's absolutely great. It's always it's a great experience for the players too, because I think people have there's definitely mixed feelings about DMPCs, probably for that same reason that the DM knows obviously the ins and outs of the quest, so it can be a little awkward playing a character in the party for even a limited amount of time. So yeah, it's always nice having guests in, and obviously it just freshens up the mood. And as a player, you're always excited to see like who the guest is, what the character's going to be. And oftentimes, I mean, for us, it's been like Natty and Ecto and James as well, who like we know outside of D&D, and then you get to see them. You get to see them play the game, and that's super cool. That's always like that's something. It's like a bonding experience when you get to see someone, role play a character in D&D. That's something special.
There's one dude that was like Natty was by far the hardest guest to manage because he played a bad guy.
Yeah.
He he helped the party with the quest, but secretly like led them to his lair, and then him and his pet dragon that was resting there fought them.
And poisoned the entire party's minds against changelings. I just want to put that out there.
True. That is a side effect of
coming into the party as a changeling. It was an uphill battle for that reason.
It was, absolutely.
Natty.
They definitely held some. They were a little racist when it comes to changelings, because they had one changeling join their party for a little bit and they fucked them over. So Natty made RPCs racist. Exactly, Beanie. That is literally what happened. That was a lot of fun though, because me and Natty were like in DMs constantly, like, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Make sure that you keep this. It was really interesting, like fun, and I don't know. I might do it again at some point, but
great.
differently.
Not every guest that comes in are going to be with knives.
But I mean, like bringing guests into a campaign like that, not only does it's nice to change the faces up, but once they're gone, you've now got an NPC who exists in the world that is much more interesting and also takes some of the work off the DM. It's just like, okay, well, now that I know this NPC's in this area, I don't know if the party ends up going back around to that place, that's a thread that I can pick back up as the DM if that guest doesn't want to come back. Like I had my players all got captured except for one. And what I did was I was like, okay, so the one player that escaped, you're going to go to the tavern next session looking for help to save the rest of your friends. So everybody else make a replacement character, and your quest is going to be to go save yourselves. And after they completed that, everybody they'd made for this mission is now an NPC that I've got control and now has a stake in the world.
Discord chat about again, but I'm assuming you said like the rest of the party rolled new characters and they went to go free themselves, and that's
exactly right.
Okay. There you go.
I was going to say, dude, this will be a fun game. Let's try fill in the blanks. Dude, Discord playing up today, dude. About to make me act
Discord
up,
is having a bad day. I don't know.
What is one of your most cherished or memorable experiences with tabletop RPGs as a DM or playing?
The end of my last campaign, I think, was one of my favorite moments in my tabletop role-playing career. Because I had never completed a campaign before, and especially as the DM, I was like, how do you end a story? How do I ensure that everyone's satisfied with how this all went? And like, there was just a lot of anxiety and questions about how this was going to go. So I went ham. I had, I borrowed the system from, Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers, I think it is. It's not fully fleshed out, but they have these systems or this mostly completed system for warfare. And I was like, all right, so you guys have built this army. You can fund it to make it better with equipment, better with training. And I'm going to build an army for the enemies. And we're going to have that game on a table over here. And it's just a bunch of cards with stats on them, stat blocks, basically. And while that's going on, the player characters are going to be infiltrating the castle to go defeat the dragon that rules this army. And so we would like spend 1 hour at one table, then an hour at the other table as they kind of managed both activities.
That's sick.
And
That's crazy.
and eventually they beat the big bad. One of the characters had been given the option to have power for this final conflict, but it would mean that they would ascend to godhood and basically die. They would have to say goodbye to everybody. They couldn't tell them where they were going. And they're like, yeah, I'll accept that after discussing with everyone. What would you do to ensure that we win this? And everyone's like, yeah, we got to sacrifice it all. So they're like, great. So we had like players saying goodbye to other players and actually just weeping at what had happened. Players discovering that one player character had been like kidnapped as a youth and was actually another player's uncle. So they went back and like did this family tree business. They're like, wow, and didn't find out until after they died. Like just the epilogue was so deep and it meant so much to everybody. And I was just so happy with how happy all of my players.
I mean, as a DM, like, because our campaign is like coming to an end, I'm bricking it, dude. I'm like, fuck. How do I end good? There's
Same.
a couple of like threads going that will provide a very interesting post final fight like ending where there's definitely some shit still needs to be discussed. But I'm shitting myself. I'm like, bro, I cannot drop the ball now. This has been a 2.5 year D&D campaign. If I bomb the ending, I probably never want to DM again. You know, like I'm bricking it, bro. Oh,
But
man.
you have to, because we're also excited for campaign 2.
Yeah.
What has me anxious about the ending of the coming campaign is that kind of foreshadowing, like you kind of dropped a little like, oh, well, the ending of this campaign is going to really affect how campaign 2 goes. And like we're really dealing with like some big evil shit, and it's like if we lose, the world could look very, very different for my wonderful little ranger that I've made to play.
I'm building the world now, assuming that you beat the big bad.
No,
but what if you don't?
Well, if you don't, then it's going to be another month waiting for you to fucking throw out the nice world that I was building. Time for living hellscape.
A world where Orcus now rules the prime material plane.
Yeah,
You guys
the
have
zero
to find a way to free the world
or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
That was a big worry I had too, because same situation, like this campaign I'm planning right now, same setting. I was like, what happens if they don't beat the dragon? Does the dragon take over more?
Yeah. Oh man.
That's cool though. Like that also in its way, because like what Beanie is saying in chat now is like, well, if we lose to Orcus, does campaign 2 become a rebellion story? I mean, yeah, because Orcus will rule the world, and someone's gonna have to stop him.
We do a Pathfinder campaign where we're just a bunch of fucking peasants
mundane farmers.
Trying to rebel against Orcus. Oh man.
Fuck no.
Hell
no.
It's like
just fucking win, please. Okay. Thank you.
Well, listen, man, we're all in this together at this point, dude. I'll do a song and dance about it, and then you'll have to let us win. Some of my best bardic inspiration came about last session, and I set that bar pretty high. I got to live up to that now. I was doing Tenacious D revamped with. Oh no, it wasn't even Tenacious D. It was just Jack Black from School of Rock. Yeah. Trying to inspire someone. I can't remember who it was in the party.
I think Nicole. Yeah.
There was like this like floating. I don't know why it was in my head, and I like threw it out like 2 minutes earlier, and then when it came to actually inspiring someone, I was like, I'll just run with whatever song I just did. Oh man,
it's funny because you're pretty like you're pretty quick to come up with like improv little inspiration bits, so it's really funny. Like it's fun to see you play a bard, because whenever you
it's still
inspire someone, I'm like, okay, how do you inspire them? And you always manage to find a way to like.
Sam Riegel definitely he comes with prepared bits, right? When he's playing Scanlan, he definitely has like, oh, I'm gonna do this pop song but with these dumb lyrics, and it's like, I could prepare that for each session, but it's still very like, it's nerve-wracking, dude. It's nerve-wracking to just sing for the homies to get them amped, you know? Oh man. And also, first natural 1 performance check.
As a bard,
since I've joined the campaign, I think I've had at least like a +12 to
Damn.
a lot of charisma checks, and now it's a plus 18. So getting a natural 1, dude, that's
It's still a 19, but man, you rolled a nat 1, so you bombed that fucking performance.
that hurt. That hurt.
Hey man, it's part of the course, dude. Part of the course.
Dude, I love we have this literally it's like a Google Doc with like just 5 lines of text, but one of the questions is just, would you be willing to guest spot on Dungeon Select Campaign 2?
If we, we take guests, and I was gonna be into that. Like, hey man, listen.
Oh.
You because I typically have little bit of a document of people that I already approached before before the guest spots will happen, like to kind of gauge interest. Like, would that be something you're interested in, to have a little guest role on Dungeon Select when Campaign 2 comes around, play along for a few sessions and then dip out again?
Well, if you're willing to take a chance on me, I'd be happy to be there.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. With the potential, obviously, to because, for instance, James has played the same character, but because the character lives in like the same city where the party's HQ is, he's been back for some guest spots whenever they were like back in town and they needed something done there. So guest spots, I'm always open to, like, hey man, if you ever want to come back because the party's in the neighborhood again.
Yeah, because like you mentioned before, like if you have a player, a guest come and play a character, that character's in the world as a much more interesting PC at that point. So obviously, as long as you don't die. Don't die. I'm sure
we've not had a guest die, right? No,
I
don't think so. No.
I mean, you know better than me, but I assume
all of our guests survived. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
We haven't had. Oh, you won't have seen it yet.
Sounds like I'll need to break the pattern.
Maybe. I mean, dude, I'm always very scared to kill characters, but it just kind of happens sometimes.
It's part of D&D, isn't it?
It just kind of happens.
I mean,
Natty died because he was a bad guy.
The podcast
like
on
the objective
character
was
death?
to kill him?
Yeah, I know you recorded the podcast on character. Have you recorded the podcast on character death?
No, that one hasn't been recorded yet.
That is one that I signed myself up for, though. I'm pretty sure that was one I would love to talk about character death. And
yeah, you did mention that.
When that one comes out, we'll be able to hear all about dealing with character death, because it is a very real thing in D&D.
Yeah,
Soko knows. And, well, I guess Koiba as well, but at least Koiba hasn't had to reroll characters yet. Soko's all too familiar with character death.
Yeah,
Soko's very familiar.
In your crew, Soko's basically the only one who has had to actually create a new character, right?
No,
with the exception of Laura.
Yeah, Laura found a fitting end for her character and just decided that it was time for her to retire and bring in someone else. Soko is the only one that, Beanie also had the choice, but he chose
I've rerolled the character. Smile.
He chose to
That's true.
play my homebrew class, playtest my homebrew class instead, which involved him keeping his old character, just altered.
Yeah, Dutch held him ransom.
Pretty much.
You can keep Bran, but you have to play my class.
Yeah, but he's basically a World of Warcraft Death Knight now, bro. Isn't that fucking sick? Come on.
Yeah, I'll never forget him constantly complaining, I don't have any bonus actions. Like, who cares, dude? Come on.
He has a few now. Smile.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, you can handle character death in so many ways, whether that's permanent or the game itself has ways of just bringing people back from the dead anyway.
Like that Matt Mercer class.
Yeah.
That is like a wandering soul, basically, like a ghost that has unresolved business in life or whatever, and can tag along with your party after death for however long.
Yeah, but like they are a ghost, so the party can't see them nor interact with them, but the ghost can like possess people, and it's like an actual like medium style. This is a ghost who hasn't been able to cross over yet because he has unfinished business here.
It's on something that what's it called, DM's Guild or something like that.
I think so. It's something Matt Mercer made, but never really. Like, it never really got like published properly, but it's out there.
It's really interesting. It's basically, I think he listed it as a death alternative. But also
lingering soul.
You can write the character to start as a lingering soul, and basically, he really stresses like this should not be like a choice for every player when they die. This should be very specific.
I have it open here. Like the fine print says, this is a complicated class the DM can offer as a choice upon character creation, or offered by the DM when a player death is surrounded by enough violence or mystery to cause the soul to cling to the mortal world. It can allow the continued play of a beloved character when resurrection is unavailable, or as a reward for a party seeking to restore the narrative lost when a central figure has fallen. It's basically, but it comes with so many like draws because,
dude, if Nicole had died and we hadn't wished him back, he better have come back as a lingering soul, because there was so much unfinished business. Like.
But there's a lot of like so many like different gimmicks that come with it. Like at first level, you get something called spirit binding, where you basically have to select an object or creature of your choice to bind to indefinitely, which is basically something they have to be around within 150 feet at all times, or else they just can't.
Anchor. Yeah, you're
basically their anchor to the world,
plane.
to the material plane, and it's interesting, but it's super complicated. There's phantom callings are basically you can be a poltergeist or a wraith or a spirit guardian, like all the typical ghost types that are out there. It's wild.
Great
it's
death alternative. Wild. Just if you haven't seen it, definitely recommend looking at The Lingering Soul, because it's really interesting, super complicated, but like a really cool.
If you got some like experienced players,
class,
it might be worth like giving it a try. It looks fun. It looks very interesting.
Meanwhile, we've got Celote Beanie in the chat. I also want to point out that Matt Meister published a Totem of the Duck Barbarian.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but that was for, what's his name? Napoleon Dynamite, the actor.
Yeah.
Like, he played that, I'm pretty sure, on Critical Role, and it was also like his first time playing D&D. It's fucking funny.
So brilliant.
I'm sure it's a good class still. You could play it for real.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a barbarian archetype, you know?
Well, there you go.
It's playable.
It's just the fun of the homebrew.
It's a very funny homebrew, because wasn't this the guy's like backstory that he was raised by like a... Instead of like, not raised by a pack of wolves, he was raised by a pack of ducks or something stupid like that. It was fucking funny.
Yeah. I've got a button for that. Hold on.
Oh.
There it is.
Nice. There you go.
Family of ducks, dude.
Super funny.
I think I mentioned this to you before, and I never ended up sending it to you, Denny. Was trying to homebrew a warlock.
Right, yes.
Just straight up like... I mean, it's just Fathomless Warlock, but with fire instead. But yeah, I definitely need to figure out some of the class traits and stuff, because my next character, I'm intending the MacGuffin to sort of give some sort of narrative motivation early on, is going to be related to some sort of Warlock patron. And yeah, I mean, initially the inspiration for changing it up was that I didn't want to be like Ford. Now I'm a ranger, that worry isn't there so much anymore, but dude, I do need to send you it. I have it in a Google Doc. It was pretty much a copy paste, and then just changing like the expanded spell list to be fire spells and changing up a little bit of the flavor. But yeah, just homebrew classes in general is now I guess more than ever it's definitely really interesting to sort of delve into homebrew, because the base game is getting so diverse now. You have so many different things to draw from, especially from a balance point of view. It's very easy to sort of find equivalents when you're putting together, like, what spell should be on my expanded spell list, or what is a balanced sort of feature for a class to have at low level. So it's I think a good time to be doing homebrew in general.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much, like even some of the things that like start off as homebrew or on like DM's Guild, made by just like some random DM in his attic room. It's like, I'm gonna make this thing. It ends up in like Unearthed Arcana as like an actual thing, and they actually get to like it's crazy. Like there's so much stuff, even in the homebrew side of things, that like gets seen by the right people, and it ends up in like official source books down the line as well. It's kind of wild, because if you look at even like core 5e compared to what is now available for 5e in terms of like races, classes, subclasses, there is so much. There's so much. It's actually it's insane.
Core 5e starts to look bland when you really consider it. Like really is. And I know like when I was on Talk Dicey, I couldn't stop talking about Tasha's Cauldron, because that thing is absolutely magical.
Tasha's Cauldron is amazing. It's one of the better books that they've brought out, for sure.
It provides a lot of options, definitely. And I think 5th edition, because it started so bland, I think it quickly sparked that desire to homebrew. Like, there was, everyone's like, well, they've introduce such basics. It's like, I want something a bit more niche. Like for the next campaign I'm doing, one of the players is a warlock, but they're like, I want to feel like a support in a kind of way. And I was like, all right, so I've created this otherworldly patron called the Inquirer. So the patron is about going out, finding knowledge, and kind of reporting back. And the mechanics of how we're going to play it is they kind of like the Divine Sorcerer, where they kind of have a pool of dice to heal. I'm making this character more of like a slight clairvoyant, where they can kind of see things in advance. And we're going to be allowing them to give like temporary hit points to friends,
Right.
to kind of protect them from incoming damage. And in doing so, also gives the caster the chance to dodge attacks as well, because it's like a shared cognizance, I think is how we're referring to it as.
That sounds super interesting. Warlock is a great template, really.
Warlock
for anything.
is a great class as a DM to have one of your players play, because there's so much story and roleplay potential there if you do it right. And
Are you excited to be DMing 2 Warlocks though?
wait, there's 2 warlocks? Hold up.
Well, Belle's gonna be
Is she now?
Genie Warlock.
That's going to be very interesting.
You didn't know?
Well, you've done 2 barbarians,
know.
you'll be
I didn't
fine.
know.
Well, yeah, but
I didn't
two
know.
barbarians is one thing, but 2 otherworldly patrons. And I feel like
I
they're going to be
mean,
very different too, because
Yeah, but from a narrative perspective, I probably won't tackle both at the same time.
No,
I mean,
obviously.
It'll kind of be gradually. Like,
it's not going to be like, okay, everyone deafen while I talk to Duke, and then okay, now everyone deafen while I
Yeah,
talk
exactly.
to Belle. So no, it's not going to happen. But I also think they're going to be very narratively different patrons as well, because like I said, I think she's planning on being a Genie Warlock, and
That looks so fucking cool, though.
well, unless it's an Ifriti, in which case it could end up being remarkably similar, because mine's a fire elemental.
I just had a little look, by the way. Core D&D brought in 9 races and currently available in all the D&D official source books, excluding the core ones. There's 35 that got added later.
Is
That
that
is
like, I
including,
guess, with sub races and stuff as well? Because it's like,
that's including the upcoming like Dampier and the stuff
Oh,
coming
right,
in
yeah.
the next book as well.
Dang.
But yeah, there's a lot of races. That's just races. There's a lot
Yeah.
of races now to pick from, and I can't believe I looked. I was like, wait, Goliath wasn't Core 5e. Hold up, but it wasn't.
Yeah, surprise! It was Volos.
Yeah. Follow added a lot of stuff though. Follow added a lot of stuff.
yeah, it's
It's kinda
no,
wild.
like I said, Core 5e. I mean, it's the basics, right? It's the basics for a role-playing game. You know, you've got humans, you've got your elves, you got your dwarves, and you've got, you know, the classes and couple of subclasses for every class, right? Maybe 2 or 3 subclasses for each class, but yeah.
I think core comes with like 3 subclasses for each class typically. That's the norm, I think.
But now it's just an absolute clusterfuck of
It is.
of
But
magic
it's also
and
great
potential.
because there's so much variety. There's very little chance that people play because even if we have 2 warlocks, for instance, because there's so many different patrons, and oh boy, here we go again.
Discord's acting up, dude.
God.
Not happy about it.
No, this isn't great. Hopefully it's fixed by Sunday, because D&D is gonna be a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
What I was saying was, like, even because of the fact that there's like 10 plus subclasses per class now. Like, for instance, we have 2 barbarians, but they play a remotely different barbarian from each other. Even with 2 warlocks, that can also the same thing. Like, even though they're the same class, because the subclass is different, that could lead to such a variety of different, especially warlock, because of the patrons. Like, even 2 fiend warlocks could still have completely different patrons, and you know, so like.
I mean, even
Not to
looking at Critical Role, like they've got in a similar relationship, they've got 2 clerics, which are a player character who has a relationship with another worldly entity. Caduceus' relationship with the Wild Mother is vastly different from Jester's with the Traveler.
Yep.
And knowing what we know now, like Jester wanted to be a warlock, and that relationship does feel very warlocky.
Yeah, it's a lot more like.
Yeah, that's what I've always like. I'm not super caught up with, but it always
I don't want
like
to say small time, but intimate.
I always
guess.
kind of like whenever she's like, because she, even early on when she like tries to commune with the Traveler, it's much more in a warlock sense than in a I'm gonna pray.
Yeah, and sometimes
sense,
the
you know?
homie does just show up.
Yeah,
You know,
it's kind of
struts
wild.
about. I wanted to ask something real quick about the campaign that you're planning, Denny. So you said it's going to be live streamed?
At first, I think it's just going to be pre-recorded
Right.
as we figure out like the dynamics of the players, because not everybody has played together before,
Right.
and I want to kind of lower the pressure of them figuring that out. But eventually, we're going to move into live streaming it, I think.
Is it going to be, I assume, but obviously in times like these, you can never be sure, but I assume it's going to be in person?
No, I think we're going to keep it kind of
It's going to be
like
online?
this.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Because like even though all of me and my players are all in Canada,
Yeah.
I'm now like 2 hours away
That's a
from
big
all
country.
of them. Yeah.
It's a big country.
That's fair enough. Because we touched a little bit on the difference between sort of playing in person and playing online, and it's I've never played a D&D campaign in person, and it's something I always envied. But I was gonna ask like what sort of complications are going to come in, because I think you see now, I mean, there are people, obviously Critical Role, they had the whole socially distanced setup for Critical Role and stuff like that. Like what sort of setup you might be going into, but obviously, yeah, with you playing online, I guess that's not a worry at all. You just don't get the benefit of playing in person, I suppose. It's a completely different thing.
I played D&D in person once, and it's so much better. It's so fucking just fun to be around the same table, yelling stuff over each other, and just like pogging at the roleplay, dude. It's sick.
But you gotta be, I guess thankful for a game system that is, you really can be played in any way. Theater of the mind. You can play it online. You can use Roll20 and battle maps and stuff like that in Discord. You can play it in person. Like it's definitely a versatile system in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully I'll catch some of it. I'm looking forward to it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like that last campaign that I ran was at the table. Like the entire campaign, we had gotten to somebody's house. We'd just sit down and be able to feel the energy and the chemistry in the room. So it's definitely a challenge to do this online, but like it's a reality. Like we can't really be in the same place. So I'm planning for that, and as such, I've like started getting my players like the equipment they need to make sure that we can do this properly. Like I've lended webcams to some. I've invested in audio equipment for some who didn't quite have the proper necessary equipment. So I'm investing in making this work. But if at some point, once this crazy world kind of calms down, I would love there to be an episode, a session where we do happen to be able to get together. I don't really have the filming equipment to make that work, but I'll figure it out for whenever.
One, two good cameras. I don't know. I mean, that's actually quite a daunting prospect when you think about it. It's very easy to do a video call. You've got, right off the bat, 6 camera angles or whatever, however many players there are. Everyone's got their own camera. It's pointed at their face. That's all you really need. Whereas when you're doing a session in person, do you want shots of the table? Like, how many cameras could you possibly want or have, and microphones too.
Bringing out battle maps, how do you get them in frame, like filmed properly and stuff like that.
And setting up microphones in a room full of people sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, there are advantages to both of these. And like another advantage I find in this is like, I know I'm a very loud person, so like when I'm talking, if there are other mics recording, I'm likely getting picked up in their microphones as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you make a socially distant set, that's a little bit less worrying.
Well,
the mics are all like spread
but
apart.
then you need more cameras because everybody's going to be spaced out.
Just get some shotgun mics or something like that. But
there's so many logistics to think about in this kind of stuff. And I've been doing online content creation for like 3 years, so I consider these things. Like on my channel, I do have a previously recorded campaign that me and some friends did years ago. Like this is not quite professional level, but it was a lot of fun, and we did record this in person, so I do have an idea of what this would be like.
And I mean, obviously, ever since Critical Role, and even before Critical Role, there's plenty of examples as well to draw on from what kind of setup would work best. But yeah, like
Sure.
you said, playing online has its advantages. It doesn't quite have that same interpersonal kind of like intimacy and investment and chemistry, but it's still a good way to play. Yeah, it's we've been doing I've been doing it for a year.
Dungeon Select
Dungeon
has
Select's been going for
started.
2.5
I actually
years.
looked up September 23rd, 2018. That's when we started. 18,
Man.
right? Yeah, 2018.
That's
Been,
a long time ago, dude.
I mean, dude, like, and that's why I'm so like, I'm breaking it, bro, because it's
Yeah.
about to end, and I need to conclude a almost 3-year campaign in a way where it's satisfying to both myself, the players. It would also be fun to have the audience that comes back every week to watch to
Yeah.
find enjoyment and not be like, not get a fucking final season of Game of Thrones situation where people fucking hated it.
Yeah.
It's a scary. It's not a fun. I mean, it's fun to be a DM right now, but it's a very scary time to be a DM right now.
Yeah, I empathize with you so heavily because this sounds so much like me leading up to the end of my campaign. So I feel you, man.
Well,
We'll see.
it's funny when you were mentioning using the that system for the battle and the party going to face the big bad. Like, that sounds like almost a perfect system for what we actually have planned is going to happen at I guess
sure.
the penultimate battle, because we're not quite facing Orcus, but we will be facing, we're going to be sieging a capital. There's going to be armies clashing. The last few weeks, a few months even, have been essentially going around this kingdom and gathering up a resistance army to face, the army of the big bad. And I was just thinking, like, man, this sounds remarkably similar to like what we might end up going through. Like this, yeah. Oh man,
It's gonna be fun. Sunday is kind of like that's when shit's gonna kick off, and I'm super nervous but also very excited
yeah.
just to see, because you guys are a bunch of fucking dumb fucks sometimes. So I'm really curious to see how
Dude,
the hell
no, we aren't.
as a party.
No, you're only saying that
No?
because of the big hole that like 2 people are a bunch of dumb fucks, and they're just enough for
Fair.
all of us.
Fair.
I'm a genius, but
But yeah, we are getting towards the time where we usually wrap up.
Yeah,
But
so-
before we do that, Denny, I'm gonna pull a Sean Evans here. I don't know if you watch Hot Ones, but I'm gonna give you just a few minutes to plug the absolute fuck out of yourself.
Oh, great. So
floor is yours.
thank you again for having me on here. So my name is Denny Brandt. I'm the host of the Dicely D&D YouTube channel, as well as the accompanied Speak Dicely podcast. On my YouTube channel of Dicely D&D, I've got an intro series designed to help new players build a character and get ready for their first game. So head over to the YouTube head over to the YouTube channel and check out that series if you've never played before and want to kind of get a grasp of the rules and get yourself prepared. And then the Speak Dicely podcast, it comes out every Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern, which would be
1 p.m.
1
GMT.
p.m.
Yep.
1 p.m. GMT and 2 p.m. Dutchess time.
Yes, Central European.
Yeah.
Central European. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I bring in guests who love tabletop, who are tabletop enthusiasts. I've got next Friday an episode with Koiba RNG, Soko, who was in the chat here. I don't know if he's still here, and Sir Duke 33 here himself. We're going to be talking about character classes.
I need to give that a watch for sure when it comes out. It's gonna be a fun one.
At the end of next month, Duke and Acelotate Beanie are going to be joining.
No.
I'm glad you're still here, Soko.
Dutch and Sellotape Beanie.
Yeah,
But everyone makes that mistake.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did I
You
say?
said Duke
You
and
said
Sellotape Beanie.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, no, it happens a lot. People
everyone
always
does it.
like Duke and Dutch.
Yeah.
They're similar names, so like it happens a lot. Don't worry about it.
Duke, Dutch, and Denny hanging out today.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah, but Dutch and Sellotape Beanie,
Hello.
we just had a conversation about world building, and that was enlightening. But yeah, like you said earlier, we have very different ways of doing it, but I don't think there's a wrong way. And like I've got so many other guests coming in. Like I recently had One Page Mage, who specializes in one shots. I spoke with Eugene Marshall from Arcanist Press, who's created an entirely new system for race in D&D 5e. And is that the end of my hot guests coming in recently? Probably. But yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I've been talking to new people, and a campaign hopefully coming soon, definitely at some point this year, hopefully within the next couple of months, to prove that I actually do play Dungeons and Dragons instead of just talk about it.
Nice, nice.
What I do want to say, I just want to add on to that, is that, like, I mean, other than hot guests, you have pretty much every week you'll have a selection of guests of varying experiences in varying systems of D&D. You talk about every aspect of D&D. Like, we've obviously Dutch and I, we've been in the Dicely Discord now for ever since we were sort of prepping to come on, and there's like a list, probably, I don't know, 30 plus, or maybe a little less, items of different topics of D&D that you want to get into, from different types of monsters, individual classes. So it really is, whether you're new to D&D and you want to learn a little more, you have a varying number of different takes about every facet of the world to learn about. And then on top of that, if you're a seasoned player, you get to hear other people's experiences that you can relate to. So it really is a great tabletop RPG podcast for everyone, that's for sure. And I was on.
Yeah, it all comes down to stories. Like, that's what did you just count how many topics there are? Beanie's saying 56.
It's
Wow.
funny because I saw the Ranger topic was like empty for the longest time.
Oh, it was so funny.
Rip, dude. There's finally someone that's like, yeah, I'll talk about Ranger. That's the only one.
And I should mention as well, like, as part of this podcast, I also search for questions from listeners as well. So if you want to submit a question to this podcast, Speak Dicely, my email is dicelychannel@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram or Twitter and just let me know if you want to have a shout out, because I'll shout you out as well when I read your question. And me and whatever guests I have will talk about the prompt you've given us.
Beautiful.
There you go.
There you go.
Exclamation mark Dicely in chat.
Exclamation mark Dicely.
The relevant links.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thanks for being here. This was great. This was a good time.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun, and I'm sorry it's much later for you guys than it is for me right now.
I mean,
I'm about to get drunk and play
normal for
Overwatch,
us.
so it's all good.
Yeah.
It's Friday.
All right, with that, I guess we can say thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll be back next week with fuck knows, honestly. But yeah, check out Teni
whatever the
and all
latest
of his
and greatest
stuff.
in gaming is.
Thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you as well. Much appreciated. See you next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.